You're just wrong.
You're fucking wrong!
This is good fun.
All right. It was a good discussion. I need to have one with you occasionally. Okay. Now that I have no energy left for the show, do you just want to fucking jump in and talk about big dumb heavyweights?
Yep.
Okay. All right, welcome one and all to a new episode of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me is one of the most despicable co-hosts, one of the most disgusting, inhuman co-hosts that a man such as myself has ever had the displeasure of working with, Phil McKenzie. How you doing?
Not too bad, you communist son of a bitch.
I think people listening to the show can tell whenever we've had a political debate just before the recording begins. Yes, Phil has outed himself as essentially a capo. He will come for you all. Phil's grandfather died in a concentration camp when he fell off a guard tower. All right, so this week on Heavy Hands, we are talking to you about, well, a bunch of fights. Let's see. What's on the docket? Coming up this weekend, we have a UFC Fight Night event in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Francis Ngannou is fighting Junior Dos Santos in the main event. There's some other interesting stuff sort of speckled throughout this card. I would not call it a particularly strong card. Of course, last weekend, the Korean Zombie roundly defeated Renato Moicano, knocked him silly in the first minute of the fight, and then choked his ass out. Well, no, he actually beat him up on the ground trying to choke his ass out, didn't he? And then we also had some Bellator shit happen this weekend. So I don't know what all of it we're going to get to, but we are going to try our best and maybe squeeze in a bonus episode or something this week. And if, by the way, I'm getting sidetracked as I always do, but there's bonus shit coming this week. So don't you worry if you are subscribed to the Heavy Hands Patreon. Some things have been recorded. There should be at least 2 more things dropping before the end of the month of June. So, thank you for your patronage as always, and keep your eyes peeled to the Heavy Hands Patreon. Otherwise, Phil, why don't we start with this Minneapolis event first of all? Heavyweights in the main event, Francis Ngannou, Junior Dos Santos. It's maybe like the best kind of heavyweight fight, which isn't saying much, but at least these are 2 like big athletic guys, you know? It's not like a couple Cyril Askers just trying to steamroll each other.
Yeah, it's a good fight. It's also an interesting one, right? Because I find myself wondering about this one, because there seems to be a fairly clear narrative going around that Dos Santos is just kind of washed, Ngannou is just going to catch him, and that's going to be the end of the fight.
Yeah.
And it's not one that I'm entirely comfortable saying is wrong. So, like, JDS is on a 3-fight win streak of not particularly good people.
Heavyweights,
I think it is Derek Lewis.
Whoa! I just realized who you included in that category. You bastard. How dare you imply that Derek Lewis is anything but the most skilled heavyweight in the world?
Derek Lewis.
He beat Francis Ngannou, goddammit.
Yeah, he did. This is true. Tai Tuivasa and Blagoy Ivanov. And none of those were particularly clean or dominant wins.
Yeah.
And none of them did he get out of them without getting hit.
Quite a bit.
Probably the most concerning one would be the Blagoy Ivanov one.
I agree.
Where it was just a long, drawn-out slugfest. So there is Ngannou, if nothing else, is a incredibly powerful and I think also clearly quite durable power punch, like natural counterpuncher. I mean, because that Stipe fight, Stipe didn't land a lot of big wind-up clean shots on him as Stipe does, because mostly Stipe just wrestled him. But even then, like, Ngannou was doing just that athlete thing of being like, I'm just really upset by the pace of this fight. I'm not actually genuinely hurt in any way.
Right. No,
You know, they're just discombobulated by the whole thing.
Miocic definitely cracked him with some serious shots. Miocic is a considerable puncher even at heavyweight, and he landed plenty of those shots after Ngannou was exhausted. And Ngannou still took him no problem. So I think it's fair to say the man has a chin as well as lots of power.
Yeah. So, and that's why I'm somewhat reticent for this one, because I'm still not actually sure if Francis Ngannou is any good.
Right. I'm so glad you said it before I did.
Because he's never shown me anything really. I mean, he's rarely really showed anything but the same basic skill set, right? Yeah. Is that if you get into range with him, he can shift his hips out of the way and he can crack you with like a big hook or uppercut. And he's really quick with it. And he starts very fast and he hits very hard.
Tremendous timing too.
Yeah. And as we saw last week, being super fast starting is very, very useful.
Yes.
Especially if you're up against someone who wants to do something like just establish a jab.
And especially at heavyweight.
Yep. But other than that, I am genuinely not sure. Like, as we saw, because I always suspected that, like, this might be the problem with Ngannou, and it was only really exposed in the Derek Lewis fight, that he doesn't really seem to have much of an ability to lead. And I'm just not sure whether he has much of an ability to strike beyond those punches. I've never really seen him do much else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, he's got a big left hook and a big right hand. Does he have more than that? Does he need more than that?
Pretty frustrating sample size from Ngannou, right? Because like either it's fights where he's not pushed at all, either because earlier on his opponent just can't hang with him, or more skilled opponents, he just knocks them out really quickly. So yeah, no opportunity to see what else he can do. Or it's fights in which he is losing and showing very little good. You know, it's just being, not even the Derek Lewis fight, like not being dominated, just being shut down. And much of the Miocic fight was the same way, where he was largely just shut down. And so we either get to see Ngannou doing the one thing he does well, or getting to do very little over the course of a longer fight. So yeah, it's frustrating to analyze Ngannou. He counterpunches, as you said. Let's talk about Junior Dos Santos though, because like this is the interesting thing of this matchup is I think Ngannou is an incredibly predictable opponent. It doesn't mean it's easy to avoid what he does well, if you walk into his game plan, but you have I think for all that we've seen, we have still only seen two Francis Ngannous, which is the one who counters you coming in and the one who waits for you to come in. Those are the two Ngannous we've seen.
Who are debatably the same Ngannou.
Yes. They're just two facets of the same. They're just Ngannou reflected through different matchups. So Junior Dos Santos, it would seem, has like, the onus is on him to make the right calls in this fight. And that's the worrying part, especially for those of us, like I suspect you as well as me, Phil, and most people on earth who really like Junior Dos Santos, think he seems like a swell guy. But that Derek Lewis fight, I think we have to talk about that. Both of these guys have had some questionable performances against Derek Lewis. But Junior's fight with Derek Lewis, his most recent win, suggests to me more that he will fall into Ngannou's game plan, whereas Ngannou's performance against Lewis just says, oh, this is who he is. He literally cannot get off of these train tracks once he started fighting.
Yeah, so, like, in terms of the whole who would I pick to beat Ngannou thing, you know who the person I really would have picked to beat Ngannou was?
Kevin Holland.
I mean, yeah. But Alistair Overeem. Because when that fight was made, I was just like, I think Alistair Overeem is going to get on his bike and oblique kick Ngannou and run around the cage and occasionally body kick him and just run, as he's done like multiple times.
Yep.
And Ngannou just won't be able, Ngannou's shown no ability to lead. And then Overeem was just like, man, I'm going to swing on this guy to scare him off.
Yes.
After getting clinched up with him, and then just got obliterated. So it was a very easy style matchup that he sort of, or at least it was a very winnable style matchup, I felt, that he wrecked by fighting like an idiot. And JDS managed to really nearly do the same thing against Derek Lewis. Because again, Derek Lewis is someone who's just can't deal with the consistent jab, plods around, kind of has decent kicking offense, but like generally also waits for the other guy to lead so he can counter.
Mm-hmm.
And JDS was just winging giant punches at him. And I was just thinking, what are you doing?
Right.
Just jab him in the belly. It's all you have to do.
Yeah.
It's all you have to do, JDS. And he still won, but it did not seem encouraging.
No. And two very different types of bad performance to fall into. Like I think Overeem is you wouldn't know it by looking at him, but he's a little bit of an insecure man, I think. When he gets in there with a guy like Ngannou, I think he basically, like, Ngannou's aura has an effect on him. He's like, oh, fuck, I need to fight this guy off. I need to prove that I'm the bully in here because this guy sure as hell looks like a bully and I've seen what he's done to his previous opponents. With Junior fighting Derek, it is a different thing where, like, it is hard not to just wail on Derek Lewis, to be fair. At the very least, like, Ngannou looks like he's ready for you to come in all the time. When people are like unloading on Derek Lewis and get into trouble, he generally looks like shit. He's like curled up in a ball. He's desperately trying to protect himself, but has no idea how. And then he just nails you because somehow you haven't been able to knock him out. So it's different. But the question is, given the opponent of Ngannou, given a different looking, a different attitude of defensive counter fighter, what can Junior do differently to what he did in the Derek Lewis fight? Like, what would you have liked to have seen there that he would need to rely on against Ngannou? Body jabs would be one thing I might say.
Yeah, I think he just should have body jabbed Derek Lewis a lot.
Which insanely something he's done in every other fight, but he didn't do it to Derek.
He did it a tiny bit. Also, just take it slowly. It's a 5-round fight.
Yes, yeah.
And just make sure you get out of the first round without anything crazy happening. Be very careful about establishing your jab. Again, as we saw last week, like, don't throw lazy jabs out there.
Mm-hmm. And if you jab and someone's head moves under your jab, and it's the first minute of the fight, do not try to continue your combination. Mm-hmm. Reset and get a look at what they're doing, because they managed to avoid your most effective punch.
Yep. So, in some ways, I feel like JDS is actually kind of a slightly bad matchup for Ngannou, because he's just got more depth in this kind of fight.
Yeah.
If he doesn't get erased, either in, sometime in the first couple rounds, then he might be a flawed boxer, as we've seen. He might have footwork issues, and he might struggle with people who push him back, and he might struggle with people who have good evasive or even just significant lateral footwork.
Mm-hmm.
But Ngannou hasn't really shown to have either one of those things.
Yeah. JDS.
So it shouldn't really matter. It will be a mid-range boxing match at which JDS has traditionally kind of always done pretty well.
Yeah. Thing is, though, I think, certain problems become magnified when everyone weighs north of 260 pounds. Bad defense is something that's much easier to get away with at 155, for example, than it is at 265, purely in terms of the quality of the punches being landed. Although the flip side of that is that everyone at 155 is also way better offensively, so there is more incentive to develop defense. That being said, I think the specific little technical problems with how Junior plays his style are going to be significant here. Because the things that work in his favor, like Alistair Overeem, he should be a bad matchup for Ngannou. And the things that work for JDS, right, are, phenomenal heavyweight stamina, excellent output, lateral movement, some semblance of cage generalship, octagon control, whatever you want to call it. These are factors which should give him the ability to kind of outwork and just wear Ngannou down over the course of the fight.
Also, he can initiate and is generally fairly good if he's given the ability to. Like, he's another one of these guys where you don't just want to hang out against him, because he's actually, if you give him time to set up his shoulder feints, to mix up jab and high jab, low jab, he's maybe even like front kick and leg kick, he's going to fuck you up. Yeah,
his technique might be very questionable, but he has the rhythm of a very good boxer. You know, he fights in that style of everything kind of plays off of everything else. Good process, as I like to say. But you talked about his fight with Blago Ivanov. Also, an incredibly favorable matchup for Junior Dos Santos. You know, very similar, like a much smaller, significantly slower, and substantially less powerful counterpuncher. That was the style that Ivanov used. That's the style he almost always plays. It's the style he brought to that fight. Very similar stylistic matchup to Francis Ngannou. And boy, did Junior Dos Santos walk into a shitload of counters. Even after the beginning stage of the fight, like, he definitely pulled ahead, which always happens pretty much for JDS. He pulled ahead as he got his feints going and as his opponent started to slow down. But even to the very end of the fight, he was stepping in and eating these big right hook counters and just could not adapt his defense to prevent that from happening. Like, he was against an opponent who had essentially decided, I'm going to get hit with this shot. I should at least hit him back when he hits me. And Junior could not get away from that. And that is a problem that seems significantly larger against Francis Ngannou, whose punches you cannot afford to just idly take while you're waiting for him to slow down.
Yeah, it is really the worrying one, isn't it? Like, it's the fact that
he always gets countered.
Yeah. And he's been, as we said, he's been fighting people who are reasonable hitters. I mean, Ivanov is really probably not. But Tuivasa and Lewis, but Lewis knocked him down. And Lewis and Ivanov, but Ivanov is, you know, he's clearly not a big hitter. He's upsetting to be hit by, but he's not finishing, you know, elite heavyweights. So this ends up being a fight that I think I would pick prime JDS to win fairly comfortably, because he had an incredible chin before the Cain Wars and the Stipe War, for that matter. And now I am less sure, but you know what? I'm going to pick JDS anyway.
Well, I'm going to come down on the side that you were teasing just then. I'm going to pick Francis Ngannou. Cause I just don't like, I don't think Junior can avoid those counters. And I think the only way he ever gets his rhythm going is by initiating. Like, that is a positive for him, but also that is what Ngannou needs to be in the fight, is for an opponent who is willing to initiate. So I just think,
like, I think he's a less bad matchup for Ngannou than like smart Alistair Overeem would be.
Right.
I think smart Alistair Overeem is probably still Ngannou's most terrible. I mean, because smart Alistair Overeem was exactly what Derek Lewis did.
Yeah, just run away and throw body kicks.
Kick him.
Yes.
Like, that was it. Didn't do anything else.
Brilliant.
And so he's not as bad, but I still think I just can't pick Ngannou. I just don't think he's very good. Like, I can't. It feels wrong to me. I can't pick just a right hand, left hook against JDS. I know there's a major chance he's just going to get absolutely flatlined, and it will be I will be incredibly unsurprised. But like, also I will feel bad like in myself if JDS just picks him apart. And the guy who just does nothing and gets jabbed for 5 rounds. Or gets knocked out.
Both outcomes will make me feel really bad now that I think about it. I don't want to see bad things really happen to either of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You would like to see a new generation of heavyweight and not have the same thing happening as light heavyweight does, where your prospects get dunked on by your previous generation who still are clearly never going to win the belt again. So yeah, it would be nice to see Ngannou come up. You know what I would like to see is Ngannou like showing something different.
That would be great.
I think he did show the one I'm interested that he did look a bit more aggressive in terms of his footwork against Blades, and he also did initiate a bit more. He has a tool now, which was a leg kick. So I will be curious to see if he can if he can pull JDS into exchanges.
Heavyweight leg kicks.
Even if he's got a particularly shifty looking, I might add, leg kick, but it's there. It's something.
That's such a heavyweight thing. Is you just sort of amble out to the center of the cage, and both of you just try at the first opportunity to throw a single low kick, and it's the only one you throw in the entire fight.
Yep, it's like I've done this equivalent of a jab because I was scared of jabbing, and now let's get to banging. Yeah,
I moved my pawn. Now let's bring the fucking queen out. That's how a smart man plays chess.
So he might. So I'm not entirely down on Ngannou's ability to bring different stuff out. I mean, he's still that guy who learned a kimura in 5 seconds.
Yeah,
and, showed incredible growth in terms of poise and ability. I'm not writing him off. I just haven't seen anything. So I'm still going to pick JDS.
And while I guess has he been training with Dewey Cooper? Ngannou is no longer training with the coach that he came up with in Cameroon.
He's off at Extreme Couture, isn't he?
Yes. So he's pretty much entirely in Vegas at a camp, not just at the Performance Center. So there's something. The two sides of it are Ngannou is the type of physical specimen who is capable of picking up new skills at remarkable speed, but also, as we have now seen demonstrated in several of his fights, different ways, he's got some serious, as basically all fighters do. Why the hell would they be fighting otherwise? But he has some serious mental hangups. He has some shit that is preventing his style from blossoming beyond the tools that he brought to the table. So
I'm basically just worried that we've never seen any boxing depth from him because he's never felt like he's had to develop it at all.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna pick Ngannou. I think he's gonna knock JDS out early, but
Yep, that's fine. I think we did this opposite thing the last time Ngannou fought the old guard. So I was just Cain's washed, Ngannou's just gonna fuck him up.
Yeah.
But what about the skill? I took the horrible cynical pick that time.
Now watch you be right, you son of a bitch. That would be cruel. Okay, alright. Well, that's it for Ngannou dos Santos. An intriguing fight. Ultimately, a disheartening and depressing one. But that's heavyweight MMA for you. After this, let's see. We've got flyweights Jussier Formiga versus Joseph Benavidez. A fight that should mean so much more than it does. That really should be very exciting. And we're going to talk about it as if it's a matchup in a vacuum and not a matchup in the quite literal vacuum that is now the UFC's flyweight division. I think that may be the only other one from this card that we're really going to try to hit before we move back to recapping stuff from last weekend. So all of that and whatever else after this. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. Alright, welcome back folks. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's see, we have ironed out a little more what we're going to talk to you about, so I'll give you the brief update here. There is one more really good fight on this card, one that I teased already, Jussier Formiga versus Joseph Benavidez. Otherwise, we're looking at things like Damian Maia versus Rocco Martin. I guess maybe interesting. It'd be pretty cool if Rocco did it.
Yeah. I mean, he'll have to, it's just basically can Anthony Rocco Martin fight the fight that he did against,
Ryan LaFleur?
What's his face? Yeah, but also
Sergio
Moraes. Yeah. And can he do it completely perfectly?
Yeah.
Can he A+ it without ever letting Damian Maia in on him?
Against a much better takedown artist than Sergio Moraes. It's basically can Rocco Martin do what Rory McDonald did to Damian Maia?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. But I don't think we're going to talk about it because we have stuff from last weekend to recap as well. And let's be honest, folks, none of you care all that much until we get to the Jones versus Maheta fight that's coming up on the horizon, right? That's the one I'm excited for. So let's talk about Jussier Formiga and Joseph Benavidez, and then we will move back to the Korean Zombie and his thunderous victory last weekend. Again, this is a fight that really should be very meaningful. Jussier Formiga has, it saddens me so much, Phil, that this is the era Jussier Formiga has to fight in. Like the last era he was fighting in of the UFC flyweight division, he was always just on the cusp of contention. He was always like the elite gatekeeper. People who beat him got title shots. Joe Benavidez, John Dodson, Henry Cejudo, Ray Borg. These are the people who have beaten him. And then back in 2011, Ian McCall got a win. And now he's in very much the same position in terms of success. Like his win over Davis and Figueiredo, that was the contender holding back the next generation. That was him proving that he still belongs at this level. And really surprising, like right when he was on the verge of being cut, he would have been cut from the UFC if he had lost that fight. And now this is the situation he's in. He's on a 4-fight win streak. He's beaten Davis and Figueiredo, Sergio Pettis, Ben Nguyen, and Uluka Sasaki. All really strong wins. Sasaki probably the least of all, but some really strong wins in there. And yet, now he has to fight Joe Benavidez, who beat him once before. And who even knows if Joe B will get a title shot for winning this fight?
Yeah, so this is, this is the logical outcome of battle royale style matchmaking. This is literally a death tournament where when you lose, you're cut. It doesn't matter if you lose a close, tightly contested fight of the night. My personal favorite from that particular card. Fight like Ortiz did against Benavidez, where he put out a career best performance. If you lose, you're cut.
Yep.
So what we get is this kind of stuff. Like, again, like objectively a great fight between two guys that I honestly would have expected to fall off a long time ago. Neither of them young in general, neither of them young for flyweight. And both guys that have kind of always been towards the top of the division, but both of which who have had some struggles. But like they are still both completely unquestionably elite. Both still riding win streaks. So 2 for Benavidez and how many is it for 4 for Formiga? Over like at the very least athletically skilled or technically skilled competition. There are no bums in these in these win streaks.
There's a lot of parity between a win like Formiga's over Figueiredo and Benavidez is over Perez. Like these are two guys who are aging. They're on the back end of their career curve, but they both have now very recently proven that they can smash some up and comers who have been smashing very good competition themselves. Two destroyers that they, Formiga utterly neutralized Figueiredo and Benavidez out-destroyered him. But, how can you question how great these two fighters are? And yet, it just sucks that Formiga, Benavidez is like the best fighter ever to win a title. So like, Formiga shouldn't have to fight Benavidez again to get to this spot, but we are where we are. The matchup itself, I don't want to just gripe too much about the circumstances, though I feel for both of these fighters. Well, is there a way to talk about this matchup without just sort of immediately revisiting what happened in their first fight?
So it's tricky not to do that, right? So I think of the two, I think Formiga has made, as you would ideally want, he is the one who has made the more improvements. He is a more comfortable back foot boxer. I think he's gotten more comfortable in the pocket. I think a lot of their first fight was just him kind of getting scared out by Benavidez blitzes that he just couldn't quite read. So the question is, can he convert that into can he actually just convert that into a win? Can he keep up? And I think the main question here is, can he keep up with Benavidez's pace? Because his last win over Figueiredo was kind of magnificent. Like it was, Figueiredo is one of the most athletically overwhelming flyweights that we've seen, and he just beat him up on the feet and took him down at will and just shut him out for 3 rounds. But Figueiredo is also not a pace fighter.
Right.
He is a burst fighter. As you've compared him to many times, he is tiny Yoel Romero. And so, like, Figueiredo was able to fight at a consistent pace that Figueiredo couldn't keep. Benavidez has still shown the ability to fight at paces which almost no one else can. The only people who have really kept up with him down the stretch are Demetrius Johnson and Henry Cejudo. And I would include this in his very, very close decision loss to Sergio Pettis, because I believe Benavidez was surging at the end there, was he not?
He was, yes. Pettis always tends to slow down late, doesn't he?
Yeah. So yeah, the question is, just can Formiga keep the work rate up? Because do I think he can submit Joseph Benavidez?
Right, because the other option is, can he neutralize Benavidez's work rate, which is something that very few fighters have ever managed to do. And their names are, Demetrius Johnson and Dominic Cruz. Very few, you either like end up fighting at pace with Benavidez, or if you're really, really good, you find some way to shut him down. And, Formiga, like, he showed some excellent neutralizing skills against Figueiredo. He showed phenomenal top control, some really well-timed and crucial takedowns in a fight where he desperately needed them. But, as you alluded to, he was not being pressured by much of a pace while he was looking for those setups. He was able to kind of sit back on his heels and relax and wait for his opportunities. And, Figueiredo is not Joe Benavidez, who has, like, if your only way to stop Benavidez's pace is by out wrestling him, no one's done it. No one but DJ and Cruz. They're the only people who have ever out wrestled Joe Benavidez. And you could argue that some of the time, Demetrius Johnson did not out wrestle Joe Benavidez. Yeah.
I mean, of the only time either of any in their fight, that their first one, that either of them was put in grappling trouble, it was DJ. He almost got guillotined.
Right. Yeah. So what you're looking at is a fight in which Formiga has to test basically his counterpunching and his clinch abilities against Joe Benavidez. The clinch doesn't seem great. Benavidez is still pretty strong there, still very willing to rip an arm free whenever he can and go to work with strikes, able to keep the pressure going, in open space. Like, this is probably one of the areas where Formiga has made the most improvements, right? You alluded to those improvements before. He has absolutely come a long way since the first Benavidez fight. I think as a counterpuncher, his footwork is much better. The form on his punches is much better. His timing has improved. I think he's a little better defensively as well. Here's something I want to bring up, right? Something that, Benavidez is really good at finding counterpunchers. Like, that's a difficult thing. Benavidez has always been really overwhelming. He's got a hugely varied set of attacks in his arsenal. But the thing that really, really caused problems, I think, for Formiga in their first fight, that was around the time he was really, I think, starting to make the counterpunching thing work. And, the thing he did really well in that fight was he feinted the hell out of Formiga. And I think that where Formiga has improved more than Benavidez has, you could also say, has maybe declined more than Formiga. I think he's, at a base level, just a better fighter overall than Formiga, and has proven that throughout his career. But he does seem to have become a little less subtle to me as a striker, a little more reliant on just the pace, just the bullish power, and just the reputation, sort of, the willingness to storm through.
I think in general, this is a thing where older fighters, they either lose the ability to pull the trigger, or they kind of lose the ability to pull the trigger on small stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, partially I think that's, him getting away from Dwayne Ludwig.
Yeah.
But he definitely has become a lot more just right hand happy than he used to be. Is that because I feel like, you don't want to, when you get older, you want to take opportunities less, and when you take them, you want to make them count. So you just feel like man, if I've got to commit to something, I want to make sure it's big.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the fact that this obviously might not necessarily be the best, like, actual way of fighting, because that's not really how the mental process works.
So does that translate to a lot more counter opportunities for Formiga in your mind?
I mean, I think so. I've also been impressed by Formiga's ability to hit counter takedowns.
Yeah.
I think that's been a big part of his success, because he really was pretty much a body lock guy back in the day. And if Benavidez is blitzing him, I think he can take him down. And unlike, the Ortiz fight, as mentioned, it wasn't that Benavidez had rock solid takedown defense. It was that he out-scrambled Ortiz.
Yeah, it's true, because Tim Elliott also got Benavidez down a bunch when they fought. He got him down 6 times in like the first 4 minutes, but he couldn't beat Benavidez on the ground. Formiga might be able to.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a real chance that Formiga wins this one. I'm still not going to pick him.
Yeah.
Just because I think the clinch has been too much of a safety zone against him for more powerful fighters. I think, and Benavidez will be able to just rush in, clinch up, get out, rush in, clinch up, get out. And I think whilst Formiga, like, there's a real risk that he can just out-grapple Benavidez. I still kind of need to see it happen before I can, even with Jussier Formiga, like, even with, like, one of the best jiu-jitsu backtake specialists, etc., in the UFC, I need to see someone out-grapple Joseph Benavidez before I'm willing to accept that it can be done.
Yeah.
And, it's just the fact that Borg, Cejudo, and Benavidez himself, once they've locked up with Formiga, they've just been able to dirty box with him fairly effective every time.
Yeah, I agree with you all the way on this one. Like, it may be a better time than ever for Formiga to have success at range with Benavidez. Maybe a better time than ever for him to have success countering him with takedowns. I think it's basically a better time than ever for him to have chances of winning this fight. He has improved, doesn't seem to have really fallen off or changed at all. Benavidez definitely has, but Benavidez was a far greater fighter to begin with. And the pace of Benavidez, the durability, that doesn't seem to have gone anywhere. I don't think he has any doubts about it. I just, like, even if Benavidez can't fight the smart and pretty fight that he smashed Formiga with last time, he can basically replicate what Henry Cejudo did to Formiga, which is just kind of storm forward and get into the clinch over and over. And he's comfortable in those places. So,
albeit without, notably, the ironclad takedown defense.
Sure. Yeah, sure. It's something. It's something. It's interesting.
Yeah. I will also note that, it's been it's always a little dispiriting to see people like, so people on Twitter recently have been talking about, how great Chael Sonnen was, and is he like in the second tier of the, it's just like, he is, I don't know how many tiers I would put him below someone like Joseph Benavidez.
Yes.
But like, the whole popularity contest thing is a bit of a bummer.
Yeah.
Like, there are many very, very good fighters at these weight classes that people just forget about in these kind of discussions.
Joe Benavidez
he is pretty much the top of the list.
Joe Benavidez is the Cowboy Cerrone of the two divisions he's competed in, if Cowboy Cerrone didn't fall apart every time he got a title shot. Like, if he was actually able to compete at the championship level. That's how accomplished he is. So, mad respect for Joe Benavidez. I would pick him absolutely in a fight over Chael Sonnen today. And and if he needed my help, I would help him. That's it for that one. I mean, what else on this card do we really want to talk about, right? Should we go ahead and move on to last week's business?
Yep, let's do it.
All right. Well, Kevin Holland,
the real star of the show. Yeah.
Can we talk a little about Kevin Holland, and then we'll hit the main event at the start of segment 3?
We should do the main event first. Otherwise,
okay, let's take a break then. You fucking bastard. All right, we're taking a break. When we come back, the main event, which is apparently not Kevin Holland, and then Kevin Holland. Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show. Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Phil has just been, should we tell him what we're talking about? Phil has just been talking about his hot take on Twitter, which is that Tim Kennedy fulfilled the same role, essentially, as Chael Sonnen, but had tons and tons of harder matchups in Strikeforce that Chael Sonnen would have lost to. And otherwise, had their roles been reversed, we would be talking about Tim Kennedy in the same light as Chael Sonnen. I was just yelling at Phil for giving me some sort of comparison which makes either Tim Kennedy or Chael Sonnen not the worst. Like, I don't want to compare them to each other because it means someone has to be second. So,
I don't know what you're talking about. These are elite middleweights, and I'm just a huge fan of both of them.
Okay. All right. UFC Greenville. Korean Zombie versus Renato Moicano. That's what we're talking about now. The main event. Phil, this maybe is influencing the reason why I picked Ngannou earlier. You and I both like fighters who, as you would put it, do a jab. We have a soft spot for guys who do the jab. And Renato Moicano did one very important jab in this fight, and it got him murdered. It didn't play out the way that maybe we thought it would, but also Chan Sung Jung has an uncanny knack for just destroying people in the opening seconds of a fight, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, like we said, it's just really useful being able to start quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there isn't really much to say about this fight, is there?
No.
Like, Moicano just threw out a kind of lazy jab. He was clearly, he clearly wanted to get into the fight. He'd be like, oh, I'm going to exchange something with you, you exchange something with me, we're going to figure each other out. But Korean Zombie was ready to counter everything right off the bat.
Yep.
And that was pretty much it. Like, that's as far as it goes. Like, it's really useful to be dialed in very quickly at the start of a fight. The only problem is that obviously for many fighters, this then means that they tend to slip out of the fight as it goes on.
Mm-hmm.
You rarely get anyone who is a lightning fast starter who is also a consistent round winner. Mm-hmm. Or someone who tends to, consistently win and get better down the stretch. You either start fast or you kind of tend to fade out.
Yeah.
You think of guys like Conor McGregor as the example.
It's one of those classic dichotomies.
Yeah. It is also worth mentioning that, like, just from another like meta perspective, is that we tend to like look at these fights and say, oh, this guy shouldn't have done this, because we don't see the counter example from the other side. So if you look at, say, for example, this fight from Moicano and like Aldo's fight against Volkanovski, then you're like, why didn't you just go for it,
mm-hmm.
Jose Aldo? And then with Moicano, you're like, why were you going for it?
Uh-huh.
Like, a lot of the time, it's relatively easy for us to criticize and point out these kind of flaws after the fact.
Yeah.
But sometimes it really just kind of is what it is.
No,
like,
I don't really think there's any way to like personally fault Renato Moicano for how this fight played out. I think it was, in some ways, like, this is he's never had a fight where he learned this lesson before. No one's ever knocked him out on the first jab he committed to.
Yep. And almost certainly no one will again in the future. Like, it's something that happens incredibly rarely. Like, it just, like I said, it just kind of is what it is. I mean, a lot of the time when fighters lose in these kind of things, they'll say, people will be like, oh yeah, so what are you going to change? And I'll just be like, nothing, I just got caught. In some ways, I would, like, this is just that. Like, it's just going to happen sometimes. I mean, admittedly, as you alluded to earlier, like, if you're going to throw out a lazy jab and you see the guy slip it, try and pull the second
Yeah,
punch.
don't chase his head with your next punch. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
don't plant your feet and stay there and try to catch him before he catches you, because clearly he's already a step ahead of you.
Yeah, but other than that, it was tremendous.
It's just a really good counter.
It was, I mean, it was really nice. Head movement, like slipped the jab, came around with cross counter, dinged him like with the left hook perfectly on the way down. Lovely. He
ducked it. He took a step as he ducked it, as he was leading into the right hand, stepped off to the angle and moved forward. Like just a beautiful counter. Yeah, it did get me thinking about jab counters. Like, it is an interesting thing. In MMA, I am always inclined to assume that like a guy with a jab is going to have an innate advantage over a guy who waits to counter. I mean, that's why you just pick JDS over Ngannou, right? Like, he does a lot of jabs and Ngannou doesn't. And jabs they should be the hardest punch to counter. They are the hardest punch to counter. But that is also why countering jabs is so very important for a counter fighter. The ability to counter a jab. Because it's so difficult, you need to have a good counter fighter needs many, many, many ways of both defending and then immediately countering that punch. Because if you can take the jab away from a good jabber, you have neutralized a huge part of their game. And it basically just looked like this fight, like that's what Korean Zombie came in expecting to do. He wanted to answer that jab and make Moicano pay for it. And looking at it, like, if he had been successful in that, but not knocked Moicano out, but if he had scared him off with those counters, like, I don't know if Moicano, if he had been convinced to stop letting his jab go on a regular basis, how would he have won this fight? So it was a very good approach from Korean Zombie. Basically what happened in the very beginning of the bout is like, Moicano comes out, he's feeling the distance, and then he immediately, unaware of what he's doing, like, he gives the range to Chan Sung Jung, who just stands there. He catches a couple of pawing jabs. So without having to show anything to Moicano, he knows almost instantly, okay, this is how far away he's standing. This is how much further he has to move in to actually land that jab. Now I'm just going to wait for him to throw one. And then he hit him. So for Moicano going forward, like, more feints would be great. More of a desire to land single jabs in the beginning. Like, it's definitely risky to try to throw a combination off of the first jab you commit to. At the risk of making John Kavanaugh look like he has any idea what he's talking about. That was not a good opportunity for a 1-2. But in the whole, like, it's a lesson Moicano probably would never have learned until he had to. He just learned it here. And really the main thing is, like, Korean Zombie did exactly what he needed to do. He countered the first jab he saw, and he did it really, really well. So.
And like you said, I mean, that's why, both from when we were talking about Joseph Benavidez, like, that's why people both as they age out, but also as they develop, they can get wound up on the idea of just launching single huge strikes and not ever leading, which are two incredibly strong tendencies in MMA fighters, because you get an imprinted idea of what the risks are on you, because you're just like, I throw a jab and I can get knocked out for it. It's not going to knock him out. I mean, maybe if you're Moicano, you might be thinking, yes, it is. But,
right.
But you get an idea of like, oh, I shouldn't be throwing this jab because it's not going to finish him, but the counter to it can finish me. And then you get the idea of like, should I be throwing anything at all? Like, it's really easy, I think, for people just to kind of go down this idea of, whatever I do can get me finished. So I'm just not going to do anything.
That's the Boss Rutan argument. That was Boss Rutan's argument against jabs. Back in the day, is that no one has to respect a jab.
So I mean, I think this was always a risk for Moicano against Santos. It was always a risk, particularly early. I think it was Zane more than us who pointed out that like Moicano is kind of a slow starter.
Yes, yeah, very good read.
And Green Zombie isn't, and so that's kind of what there is to it.
That's what there is to it. What else from this piqued your interest?
I mean, in general, it was a fight. It was a card for like inconsistent but athletically skilled, like tall black guys showing up. Like, I was generally impressed by Randy Brown and Andre Ewell, and
Well,
not
you heard it here
impressed
first,
and
folks.
horrified by Kevin Holland.
Phil McKenzie was impressed by a black person. You heard it here first.
It is the first time.
You are you are getting canceled, my friend. No, yeah. I mean, what did you think of the Brown Barberena? Did we talk about that one on the main show?
No, it was one of those ones where we just said, here are the dynamics.
Yeah.
And we just sort of ducked out of it pretty quickly.
Did you see any, like, to me, it kind of looked like a performance. Brown was on point, but he was kind of on point in the exact same frustratingly limited way he always is. Do you know what I mean?
No. Elaborate. I just thought he looked pretty good. Like, I thought he could have gotten sucked into a poor fight, and he didn't. I thought it was good.
That's true. That's true. He's still to me like, I don't know. What the hell am I even critiquing this dynamic for? It is literally the John Jones dynamic. But like, the rangy strikes and then the clinch and no real connective tissue between them. You only get to the clinch which is where you're like really good when the other guy takes you there. But I will say, what?
But he was beating Barberena up really bad at range most of the time.
Yeah,
so
that's true. That's
fine.
true. He did a significantly better job, I think, asserting himself at distance.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I just thought he was going to get, like, since that fight with Bilal Muhammad, I was just like, Brian Barberena is just going to march him down. That's what Bilal Muhammad did. But obviously, Brian Barberena does not have the same technical depth as Bilal Muhammad.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, Bilal, remember the name Muhammad.
Yes, thank you.
And yeah, so I just thought he did a really good job. He just stayed consistent. He worked the body a lot. Snap kicks to the body combined with jabs all make sense. Didn't get discouraged. Fought at a reasonably high pace for 3 rounds.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was genuinely impressed.
Yeah, I want to reevaluate my position. I'm just rewatching some Randy Brown footage now, but like, I'm doing a mental comparison of the kind of range work that we saw in his older fights, and it is a lot less systematic. It's a lot less like he has an idea of what he needs to be doing from each moment. Like, one thing that does stand out here is how actively he got himself away from the fence. And pressed in open space. He did a much better job, I think, of managing the distance he needed to fight at. And so he did essentially turn it into a fight where Barberena needed to close the gap, and then he mauled him into clinch. So,
also, he did a good job of pressing Barberena. Like, we've often said, if you've got a reach advantage, don't necessarily just walk back and let the other guy keep coming in on it. Throw a little bit of Corey Sandhagen in there, like, force the other guy back, make it the artillery barrage in front of you as you move forward.
Look at Conor McGregor, dude. Reach is an incredible pressure tool.
Yeah. And he did a really good job of that, and mixed up his targets. I thought it was a great performance. Like, I still want to see him not do weird shit on the ground, and we didn't get to see that, but, it's encouraging for me.
Yeah, the assertiveness of the striking is what I like. Because with a guy with like a good athletic ability and that reach, I need to see him making that reach a factor, even when the opponent is not just trying to close the distance on him. He needs to take advantage of that. So yeah, good stuff from Randy Brown. I don't know, he's only 28. We may still see some really good performances out of Randy Brown after a somewhat rocky start. Who knows? What else we got here? I mean, we have to talk about Kevin Holland, Phil.
We do.
How did you let me talk about Randy Brown and Brian Barberena before Kevin Holland?
This fight sucked ass in an admittedly hilarious way.
They all do.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is that, as we've said before, we're connoisseurs of terrible fights. We watch them together with Zane for the Depressed Us. And Kevin Holland he's just such an incredible prospect. You could see the raw potential for terrible fights in him. And he just outperforms at every opportunity in giving us every type of terrible fight. Yeah. Like, I mean, were you predicting a Wallenstall performance? I was
not. I was predicting that about his, also one, Wallenstall in which the area in which DiCarico kept beating him was in the clinch.
Yes, exactly.
Just like the Mearshart fight. Kevin Holland has some insane chip on his shoulder where he will insist on losing a slogging fight. like he just can't let it go. Once he sees that someone might be better than him in a certain phase, he has to just throw himself wholeheartedly into that phase as often as possible.
And yes, only improved by when
thank you.
Looked like he popped his trap and then remarkably became a better striker.
I'm so glad you said that, because that was my favorite detail of the fight, is that Kevin Holland, he does so much weird shit at range, and he is capable of being such a good striker. He has so many of the right tools and the know-how to use them. It was not until he had his right shoulder dislocated that he suddenly realized he had a jab, and he started to use it a lot. It was only at the point at which he could not use his right hand that he began to just piece Dicarico up at range with the left, which wasn't there.
There was something even better which happened, which is that his right hand, I don't think his shoulder dislocated. I think his trapezius popped or something.
I don't think I understand the distinction.
It was in the end of the second round. You could see that it had happened.
Yeah.
And he started holding his right hand like really tightly cocked, right? And then he threw it, and he clearly couldn't throw it the way he wanted. And so he ended up accidentally throwing it good. And then he popped Dicarico like 3 times with just clean, straight right hands, because he couldn't like flail out his elbow and throw a huge arcing punch. He just had to throw it straight without wind up. And it was like, why don't you do this before you're fucked up?
Well, because he didn't have any reason to. He could do everything before. He had so many options.
Including meaninglessly holding him up against the fence and occasionally getting elbowed.
Yeah.
Tremendous.
Kevin Holland is really something special. He's, I don't know, like, I don't want him to get better at fighting. Like, that's the thing, is he could. You saw that third round, you're like, oh shit, there's like some fundamental skills in here. And he knows how to use them. But the fact that he always makes the worst possible decision for each opponent he's fighting is what makes him special. And he has now picked up 2 extremely controversial wins in a row as a result.
Yeah, so. I mean, I do just want him to maybe carry on robbing continuously better opposition whilst fighting like a moron.
Have him fight Bojan Veličković next. It'll be great.
Sadly, he's cut, is he not?
Oh. Have him fight, I don't know. God, the middleweight's just full of them. Like Kevin Holland. Well, go on.
Darren Stewart sounds like it would be incredibly weird.
Oh, God.
I think that was Zane's suggestion in his article.
Yeah, I mean, I like the sound of that.
Like Darren Stewart, an incredibly weird guy. An incredibly emotional guy who clearly gets very upset by things. And Kevin Holland. Like, on the one hand, Darren Stewart may just club him unconscious. On the other hand, Kevin Holland may outwit him.
Mm-hmm.
And on a third hand, we might get a complete dogshit fight like both of their last fights.
I want to see Kevin Holland fight, God, all of these people. I don't see a name I don't want to see him fight. Jack Marshman versus Kevin Holland. Let's do it. Andrew Sanchez versus Kevin Holland. Let's fucking go.
Yep.
Jared Cannonier versus Kevin Holland.
Oh, Jesus. That's just cruel.
Bevon Lewis, Ian Heinisch. Make all of these people fight Kevin Holland. Okay. Well, I have literally
realized we are the only people in the world who this is a sickness, it has to be said. Like this is not a good thing for us to enjoy.
I can stop supporting.
Objectively terrible.
I can stop supporting Kevin Holland anytime I want. I just don't want to.
Yeah. But you can.
I'm happy like this. Oh God. Right. Okay. Well, I think that's it for this week's Heavy Hands. It's me saying I'm happy and then a long silence as the weight of my lived experience really settles on my shoulders. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Heavy Hands. Coming up next week, we may have some recap of Ngannou, dos Santos for you, but really we are looking forward to two big title fights. John Jones versus Thiago Santos, a man who may in fact be insane and powerful enough to beat John Jones. I am still going to be beating that drum. That is going to be a potentially a competitive fight. So interesting. It's the closest we're going to get, I think, to Jones versus Rumble. And then we got Amanda Nunes versus Holly Holm, which is one that I'm actually quite interested in, even though it'll probably be absolutely abysmal to watch. So both of those are coming up. The rest of the card is looking pretty good. It's got some good stuff on it, definitely. So look forward to that for next week's episode. If you haven't already, as I said before, check in on the Heavy Hands Patreon. This week, before the end of the month of June, there will be more content dropping for your $3 a month subscription. And before we wrap things up, Phil, any plugs?
So obviously I will be doing Dos Santos Ngannou with David, where I will be once again making the pick, which gets me roundly mocked when Junior Dos Santos gets knocked out in the first 30 seconds. And other than that, I'm also doing a piece which I was going to put out when Cain fought last, but I'm going to now repurposed it, which is about like the death of the JDS, the death of the JDS Cain era, and how, you know, we were all looking forward to a modern, this kind of transformative era of modern heavyweight when these guys were going to take over from Lesnar and it was going to drive the Fox deal and it was going to be this amazing new world, and how we're now like living in the embers of the end of that.
Wow.
Yeah. You were saying you were happy. So, you know, I
feel great now.
I'd just add to that.
Well, I may have a quick piece coming out this week, just sort of a short breakdown of jab counters because of what happened to Renato Moicano, and what Korean Zombie did to him. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Otherwise, there will be some UFC 239 content coming next week, undoubtedly. But for this week, let's try and keep it simple. I don't know, Phil. I've also been toying with the idea of doing a quick piece about bare knuckle boxing, since everyone has been hyped about this, and I don't really like watching it myself. I would like it to be different. So
it is great that like it shows something about human potential, that we can take almost any like bloody, violent, hideous sport and then actually make it pretty boring.
Yeah.
It's something that is, I think, underrated.
Yeah.
About us as a species.
A true reflection of human ingenuity, doubtless. So yeah, bloodyelbow.com is where you'll be able to find that stuff and all of the horrible, depressing shit that Phil talked to you about. Twitter.com is where you can find both of us personally if you want to get in touch or follow all of the hilarious things that Phil and I have to say. Mostly Phil. I mostly just get mad on Twitter. But you can find Phil at Evil Drag Jackson and myself at Boxing Bush, BUSCH. And until next week, thank you all once again for listening. And if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.
Yeah, you're right. Well, it's not the greatest card, is it?
No.
Dober Reyes should be a banger.
That's going to be fire. No doubt.
I'm really going to enjoy Drew Dober repeatedly taking Marco Polo Reyes down.
Oh no, you're right. Oh god, it's going to suck. The whole card's going to suck.
All right, let's not get that energy. Let's keep the angry energy and not the despairing energy.
Fuck you, Drew Dober.
Yeah.
Pussy. Okay, we're good.
Drew Dober's probably right wing.
Have you looked at him? He probably is.
Yeah. Look at his chin.
Yeah.
That's the chin of a born Republican.
His name is Drew Dober. He was beaten by a German, and that invested in him so much respect for the Teutonic people that he went and married that German's relative.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He is a freak.
Yep.
Fucking psychotic Nazi motherfucker. Destroy Drew Dober.
How dare he take Marco Polo Reyes down?
Then again, Marco Polo Reyes' name is an evocation of a legacy of colonialism.
Yes, that is true. That is definitely much worse.
The imperial legacy of Marco Polo Reyes' name.
Yes. Fighting Christopher Columbus Carriazo.